Let me tell you something. If you think Walter White suffered the most in Breaking Bad, you were not paying attention. Because the real tragedy of Breaking Bad was never the man who became Heisenberg. It was the boy who never stopped wanting approval, Jesse Pinkman. And honestly, it sucks to be Jesse Pinkman. Not because he was dumb, not because he did drugs, not because he made bad choices, but because he loved too easily, trusted too quickly, and kept looking for validation from the worst possible person. And if you've ever stayed loyal to someone who kept hurting you, this is going to hurt. Let's start with the first thing that makes Jesse tragic. He's not stupid, he just believes he is. And that difference is psychological damage. From the very beginning, everyone treats Jesse like he's a joke. Teachers, parents, society, even Walter, especially Walter. You can literally see it in the way Walt talks to him condescending, dismissive, mocking. Every time Jesse tries to contribute something, Walt looks at him like, wow, the idiot speaks. And when someone keeps treating you like you're stupid long enough, you start believing it. That's called internalized shame. Jesse doesn't fail because he's incapable. He fails because he's convinced he's incapable. And that is way more dangerous. Now let's talk about his parents. Because trauma doesn't start in the lab, it starts at home. Jesse's parents clearly favor his younger brother, the good son, the gifted one, the one who lives up to the expectations. Meanwhile, Jesse is the disappointment, the problem, the black sheep. And what happens to kids who grow up constantly feeling like the disappointment? They look for validation somewhere else. Enter Walter White, the chemistry teacher who finally tells him, you can do this. And that's it. That's all it took. Not money, not power, not ego. Just someone believing in him. And that's why Jesse stays. Even when he shouldn't, even when it's destroying him. Because when you grow up feeling unwanted, the first person who sees potential in you feels like oxygen, even if they are slowly poisoning you. And let's be honest, Walter did not see Jesse as a partner. He saw him as useful, replaceable, disposable. And the worst part, Jesse keeps choosing him anyway. Why? Attachment trauma. Jesse forms anxious attachment. He clings. He seeks reassurance. He wants approval. He wants to fix things. Meanwhile, Walt, avoidant, narcissistic tendencies, cold, detached, uses affection strategically, pulls away when convenient. The worst combination possible. And if you have ever been in that dynamic, you know how addictive it is. Because sometimes Walt praises him, sometimes he protects him, sometimes he says, you did good. And that tiny bit of validation is enough to reset all the damage. It's literally intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You don't win every time, you win just enough to keep playing. Jesse keeps playing, and every time he loses more of himself. Now let's talk about guilt, because this is where Jesse truly breaks. Jesse actually feels things deeply, painfully, uncomfortably. When someone dies, he doesn't rationalize it, he doesn't justify it, he doesn't say it was necessary. He spirals, he drowns in guilt. The kid on the bike, Jane, Gail, every single death sits on his chest. And Walt? Walt intellectualizes everything. He turns it into strategy. He turns it into logic. He says this had to be done. Jesse says, why are we like this? And that right there is the difference between someone becoming a monster and someone being trapped by one. Let's talk about Jane, because that's where Jesse's heart truly shatters. Jane was not perfect, but she saw him. Not as an idiot, not as a screw up, not as a sidekick. She saw him as human. And for someone who has always felt like a mistake, being seen like that is intoxicating. Was their relationship healthy? No. Was it codependent? Absolutely. But it was real, and when she dies, Jesse doesn't just lose a girlfriend, he loses the one person who made him feel enough. And the worst part, the audience knows something Jesse doesn't. Walter could have saved her. He stood there and let her die. And Jesse still calls him, still trusts him, still works with him. If that doesn't break your heart, I don't know what will. Now let's address something controversial. Jesse is not innocent. He cooks meth, he sells drugs, he makes terrible decisions. But here's the difference he never enjoys hurting people. He hates himself for it. Walt enjoys control. Jesse hates consequences. Walt manipulates. Jesse internalizes. And internalized guilt destroys people much faster than external ambition. And here's the most painful part. Jesse keeps trying to leave multiple times. He tries to walk away. He tries to build something else. He tries to disappear. But Walt always pulls him back in. Sometimes with threats, sometimes with fake fatherly concern, sometimes with guilt. And Jesse keeps believing this time it'll be different. That sentence has destroyed more lives than any drug. Pause for a second because I want you to think about this. How many of you stayed in a toxic friendship because you thought they needed you? How many of you tolerated disrespect because sometimes they were nice? How many of you confused manipulation with mentorship? That's Jesse. That's why it sucks to be Jesse Pinkman because he doesn't know he deserves better. The thing about Jesse Pinkman is that he never wanted to be a villain. He just didn't want to feel like a failure anymore. And that difference is everything. Because Walt wanted power, Jesse wanted worth. Walt wanted to feel superior. Jesse just wanted someone to stop looking at him like he was disposable. And when you build your entire identity around someone else's approval, you don't notice when you're disappearing. You just keep performing, trying harder, breaking more. Let's talk about how Walt slowly isolates him because that's what manipulators do. They don't just control you, they isolate you from anyone who might wake you up. Every time Jesse starts forming a real connection, Walt interferes. Jane, gone. Mike, undermined. Andrea, weaponized. Even when Jesse works with other people, Walt makes sure Jesse feels like he's incompetent without him. That's psychological dependency, and it's terrifyingly subtle. Walt constantly switches between "you're useless" and "I need you." That confusion destroys self trust. Jesse stops believing his own instincts. He starts asking Walt what to think, what to do, what's right. That's how you raise someone without touching them. Now let's talk about the moment Jesse truly begins to break. Gail. This is where the show stops being about crime and starts being about conscience. When Walt manipulates Jesse into killing Gail, Jesse doesn't just pull a trigger. He loses the last piece of innocence he had. You can see it in his face. He's shaking, he's crying, he's terrified. Because unlike Walt, Jesse doesn't have the emotional compartmentalization skills of a psychopath. He feels the weight of what he's done and it crushes him. From that moment forward, Jesse is not just traumatized, he's fractured. He throws party not because he's having fun, but because he doesn't want silence. Silence means thinking. Thinking means remembering, and remembering means feeling. So he surrounds himself with noise, drugs, people, music, chaos. Because if the room is loud enough, maybe his guilt won't be. And can we talk about how Jesse processes pain? Because this is important. Walt externalizes pain. He blames others. He becomes aggressive. He escalates. Jesse internalizes pain. He self destructs. He numbs. He spirals. That's why Jesse's suffering looks messy, while Walt's look powerful. But make no mistake, self destruction is still destruction. Jesse starts believing he deserves punishment. You can see it in how reckless he becomes, how careless, how almost indifferent to his own survival. Because deep down, he thinks he deserves to suffer. And when someone believes that, they stop protecting themselves. Now let's talk about Andrea, because this one hurts. Andrea represents something Jesse never had: normalcy, a chance to be good, to be gentle, to be needed in a healthy way. He bonds with her son, he tries to be stable, he tries to show up. For once, he isn't just a screw up, he's someone dependable. And what happens? That connection gets used against him. Because when you're vulnerable in the wrong world, your softness becomes leverage. And that is one of the most brutal things about Jesse's arc. Every time he tries to become better, the world punishes him. Not metaphorically, literally. And when Andrea is killed in front of him, that's not just cruelty, that's psychological annihilation. That's someone telling you you don't get to love anything. You exist to be used, and Jesse believes it for a while because trauma convinces you that suffering is your identity. But here's the most interesting part of Jesse Pinkman's story: he never becomes like Walt. Even after everything, even after betrayal, he doesn't turn into a monster, he turns into someone who wants out. And that's powerful because Jesse's final act is not revenge, it's escape. Now let's zoom out. Why does it suck to be Jesse Pinkman? Because he feels too much? Because he attaches too deeply? Because he internalizes guilt that isn't entirely his? Because he keeps believing he can fix things even when he can't? Because he believes love can survive toxicity? Because he believes loyalty will be reciprocated? Because he thinks if he just tries harder, he'll finally be enough. And that belief is heartbreak waiting to happen. Jesse survives, but he doesn't win. He escapes, but he doesn't heal overnight. Trauma doesn't disappear just because you drive away screaming. Freedom isn't the same as peace, but at least he chose himself in the end. And sometimes, for someone who has spent their whole life choosing everyone else, that's the biggest victory. That's why it sucks to be Jesse Pinkman. Not because he was weak, but because he was human. Too human in a world that rewarded monsters.